had a good day today, and thank you for the wonderful way you've worshiped, not only this morning, but this evening, and then this afternoon, just being able to be together a little bit and eat and socialize and visit and talk, and all of that's been great. Thank you all for all of you who participated in that. That means a lot, and I appreciate that so much. When Christians get together and eat and have a potluck like we had today, it's always interesting to kind of to watch and see how all of that unfolds. And it's especially interesting when you go other places and across this country and it's all pretty much the same. There's always more food than anybody can eat. And it's always good, you know. I was in Columbus, Ohio a couple years ago, and there was a little boy about 7. And I was getting ready to go through the line at the potluck on a Sunday afternoon, and he came up next to me and he said, "You're new here, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "You need me." I said, "Okay." He said, "I'll take you through the line and show you what's good and show you what's not good." I said, "Okay." So I started to reach for something. He said, "You don't want that. That's not good." And I started to reach for something else, and he'd say, "No, you don't want that. That's not good." I went through that whole line with all this wonderful food. I let him pick out my food, and I had 2 chicken legs and 2 pieces of pizza. And I left all that good food sitting there, and I thought, this ain't right. So I sat down with that little boy, and I ate, and eventually I got to notice he got preoccupied with somebody else. I went back and got the good stuff. All right. So you never know. Open your Bibles this evening to Acts the 14th chapter, beginning in verse 21. Acts chapter 14 and beginning in verse 21. Paul has been on a preaching trip, and we're just jumping in the middle of this text. But in Acts 14 and verse 21, after they had preached the gospel to that city, preaching in the city of Derbe, and had made many disciples, they returned to Lystra and to Iconium and to Antioch, strengthening the souls of the disciples, encouraging them to continue in the faith, and saying, through many tribulations, we must enter the kingdom of God. Verse 23, when they had appointed elders for them in every church, having prayed with fasting, they commended them to the Lord in whom they had believed. That's always struck me in verse 23. They appointed elders for them in every church. What that says to me is that must be important. It must be very important. Over in the book of Titus in chapter 1 and beginning in verse 5, Titus chapter 1 and beginning in verse 5, Paul writes to Titus and he says, "For this reason I left you in Crete, that you would set in order what remains and appoint elders in every city as I directed you." He said, I want you to set some things in order. And that involved appointing elders in every place. Do you know that choosing church leaders is the most important decision in the history of any local congregation? It takes precedence over any other decision. It's more important than who preaches from the pulpit. It's more important than the construction of a building. It's more important than a Bible class curriculum. It's more important than all of those things. And I tell you why that is. Because everything, ladies and gentlemen, everything rises or falls on leadership. When you have solid leadership, when you have visionary, sound leadership, it strengthens God's people. But weak leadership or no leadership will always paralyze a church's potential, every time. The proverbial writer said it best when he said, where there is no vision, the people perish. Everything rises or falls on leadership. Now, here's the irony in all of this. The irony in all of this to me is this. When men come into this area of leadership, when men come into the eldership, they step up to step down. They step up to serve. Because good shepherds are like the good shepherd, who said, I didn't come to be served, I came to serve and to give. So shepherd leaders who follow the good shepherd's leadership step up, that is, they step forward, to step down and serve the people. Understanding what God calls these men to be gets well beyond what I think some people have reduced to a mere check-off list by Paul in a couple of passages. And I think sometimes if we're not very careful, we can't see the forest because we focus so much on the trees. And the forest comes down to the question we're going to talk about tonight. The forest comes down to the question, what is an elder anyway? What is he? What exactly is he? And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I am 65 years old. Now wait a minute. You're supposed to gasp at that. You're supposed to gasp and say, no way. So let's try that again. I'm 65 years old. Somebody say no way. Oh, okay, now, good. Now we can proceed. I'm 65 years old, and I don't have any meetings I've preached over the years. I want to tell you, this is the first time I have ever been asked by shepherds in a congregation to preach on this subject. I've done it at home a lot over the years, but in meetings, I've never been asked, ever, to preach on this subject. I think that says a lot. I think that says something good about your shepherds. So let's talk about what is an elder. I want you to write this down. An elder is someone who raises the bar. An elder is someone who raises the bar. When I was a kid, we would play the game of high jump. Now, in my neighborhood, we were high tech when we played high jump. We had a bamboo fishing pole and a mattress, okay? And so you would run and jump over the bamboo fishing pole and land on the mattress. And then somebody's big brother from down the street would show up. And you know what we did when the big brother showed up? We raised the bar a little bit. Suddenly there was a whole new standard that had to be reached. God calls upon shepherds to raise the bar. I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but besides a couple of family qualities in Timothy and Titus, the character traits, the behavior, character traits of shepherds are the same for every Christian. Think about that. Should not all of us be respectable and hospitable and free from the love of money and not quick-tempered and devout and sensible and self-controlled? Should not all Christians be that? Absolutely. So what's the point of Paul listing that in these two passages? Because shepherds are challenged to raise the bar. Shepherds are challenged to set the example, to lift the standard of what it means to follow Jesus. In 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 3, in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 3, Peter says to shepherds, not as lording it over those allotted to your charge, but proving to be examples to the flock. That's what I mean by raising the bar. Because when you are around the godly example of this kind of life, it motivates you to live a higher kind of life. It motivates you to grow stronger in your faith and to be a better Christian. In other words, the lives of people who are living for Christ should inspire the rest of us to do the same. Should inspire the rest of us to raise the bar in our home life, to raise the bar in our prayer life, to raise the bar in our Christian life, and our faith and our dedication and our personal character. So how does all of this work? This raising the bar, how does this work? All right, let me give you three things. Number one, elders raise the bar when they shepherd us. Let me say that again. Elders raise the bar when they shepherd us. In 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 2, he says, shepherd the flock of God among you. Shepherd, interesting term. Bible shepherds were not day laborers. Bible shepherds did not punch a time clock. Bible shepherds did not check out at 5 o'clock and go home. Bible shepherds, Old Testament and New Testament, lived with their sheep. The Bible shepherds birthed the lambs. The Bible shepherds would lead the flock to green pastures. The Bible shepherds would protect the sheep at night from predators. Bible shepherds knew their sheep and their sheep knew them. And they had a relationship with them. And through time and through touch, Bible shepherds would eventually become to, and I know this sounds strange, smell like sheep. Now then, the greatest compliment you could ever give an elder of God's people doesn't sound like a compliment at all, but it really is. You, brother, smell like sheep. Now, I don't recommend you go around telling them that, but you understand the principle and the point in all of that. You can't smell like sheep unless you spend time with sheep. They raise the bar when they shepherd us, when they build a relationship with us. Secondly, they raise the bar when they mentor us. In Hebrews 13 and verse 17, it says they keep watch over our souls. Implied is the idea of mentoring us. An elder is someone who's walked down the path for a while. And as they walk down this path with God, they don't walk alone. They want to take us with them. Godly shepherds aren't afraid to get down on their hands and their knees so they can help you and me get back on our feet. They're not afraid to pray with us. They're not afraid to cry with us. They're not afraid to go the second mile with us. Because after all, the goal of God's shepherd is to go to heaven and take the rest of us with him. So they raise the bar when they mentor us in that way. And third, they raise the bar when they equip us. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 11 and verse 12 says that. When they equip us. Shepherds deal with all kinds of sheep. Sometimes there's problem sheep. Sometimes there's possibility sheep. Sometimes there's prodigal sheep. Some sheep are high maintenance. Some sheep are young and immature. And some sheep are old and immature. And some sheep are quite mature. But they reach out to all, and they make everyone feel needed, and they make everyone feel valued, and they make all of us, help all of us, find our God gift. They help us find ways that we can contribute to the good of the whole. That's raising the bar. They raise the bar to lift up our walk with Christ. So what is an elder? You know, if you ask that question to many people, I think a lot of people have the mindset that they envision an elder. Elders are men who sit behind closed doors and make mundane decisions about the minutia of a congregation. They're kind of the business managers of the group. Somebody, after all, has to decide when we're going to replace the flooring or when we're going to repave the parking lot. Somebody has to decide all of that. That's what elders do. God spare us from that kind of leadership, because that's not leadership at all. God give us spiritually minded men who will pull up alongside of us and raise the bar as to what we need to be as a Christian. And what's my attitude toward them? In Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 17, when you come to the end of the book of Hebrews, the Hebrew writer says in Hebrews 13 and verse 17, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls as those who will give an account. Let them do this with joy, not grief, for this would be unprofitable for you. I've known churches that wanted elders that didn't have them, only to get them, and then decide they don't want them anymore. It's kind of like, I told you this morning, we'd raised our 4, and they were all grown and married, and we adopted 3 more. And it's always interesting as you deal in the area of adoption of children. A lot of children say they want to be adopted. They say they want parents. And then they get parents. And then they realize, wait a minute, these folks have expectations of me. These folks have rules. I can't do everything I want to do. I'm responsible to them. They make me accountable. I don't like that. And sometimes that's the way it is with churches, folks. People say they want an eldership, they want leaders, and then all of a sudden, when they make judgments that they don't agree with, they don't want them anymore. And elders have to make judgments, and it's not always easy. I served as an elder for 10 years until I resigned earlier this year, because I'm just doing full-time meeting work now, and I'm not home enough, and I can't do both. But I will tell you from experience, elders have to make judgments sometimes, and some of those judgments people don't understand or may disagree with because they don't have all the facts. And shepherds can't always give you all the facts, because there may be some things that they need to hold kind of close to them for whatever reasons. And, a lot of it just comes down to trust. If these men are the kind of men of character we believe them to be, then we have to at some point trust that their judgment is good and God-honoring, and that we are going to be responsible to them and be responsive to them in the way we follow them. So I'm going to leave you tonight with 7 things. 7 things. Elders are men who, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Elders are men who, I'm going to give you 7 things. And it's not complicated. Number 1, elders are men who have been around life long enough. Elders are men who have been around life long enough. The very term elder implies some age, implies perspective, implies some wisdom, implies judgment. And how do you get all of that? Well, time is what lends perspective. Experience helps with wisdom. And age can refine some judgment. In other words, an elder is someone who has been put to the test over time and has a track record of faith. There's things about life that you can't possibly know until yours has been put to the test. An elder is someone who's been there and done that. It doesn't mean he's been there and done everything, but he's been there and done it enough that he knows about life, and he has a track record of being calm in the midst of confusion. And he has left in his wake people who have been made better because he's been a part of their life. So when I talk about what is an elder is someone who's been around life long enough. You say, well, how long? Long enough. Secondly, he has been around the Lord long enough. He's been around the Lord long enough. Being an elder is more than life experience. Being an elder is Jesus experience. In other words, an elder is not somebody who's blown out a bunch of birthday candles. Job 32 and verse 9 says, age is no guarantee of wisdom. The abundant in years may not be wise, he said. But he is someone who has walked with Jesus long enough, knows God well enough, and it is obvious by his character, by his life, by his family. He's someone who's been around the Lord long enough. Third, he's someone who has been around the devil long enough. He's been around Satan long enough. In other words, over the course of time, he has wrestled with the tempter and won. Now, it doesn't mean he's won every battle. But he has some years of combat experience behind him. The kind of combat experience that has toughened his resolve. In other words, good church leaders are veterans of the spiritual battlefield. He understands how to put on the armor, and he helps the rest of us put on ours. I don't know who you want leading you, but I'd like somebody who's been around a while. Somebody who has some season to him. I want somebody that I can talk to who is shock-proof. I want somebody I can talk to who will listen, and who will listen with a mind of wisdom and offer some advice to me that is real, that is practical. I want someone who can point me to some resources to help me win some of the same battles that they have fought. I want somebody who takes Satan seriously and will help me put on the armor and wear it effectively. Number 4, an elder is someone who has been around the Word long enough. 1 Timothy 3 and verse 2 says that he is to be able to teach. The King James Version says apt to teach. I heard a guy say one time, well, I'm apt to do it one of these days. That's not what that means. That's not it. It has to do with ability. One who is able. One who has a measured ability. Doesn't mean he has to be a great orator of some kind. It just means he knows his Bible. He lives under the cross. He lives under the cross with the Bible in his hand. He does more than just study the Word. He embraces it. He lives it in his life. Titus 1 and verse 9, he holds fast the faithful Word. He holds it positively because he exhorts us in sound doctrine. He holds it negatively because he refutes those who contradict the Word. You know, Peter wore a lot of hats. He wore the hat of an apostle. He wore the hat of a gospel preacher. But he also wore the hat of a local church elder too. And it's that Peter who wrote, when it come to the end of his second letter, he admonishes all of us to grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. An elder's like the rest of us. We're all growing. Nobody ever reaches the place where we can say, I know it all, I got it all, been there, done that, check that off. We all grow and we keep on growing. An elder doesn't know everything, but an elder knows enough. And he is committed to learning more in his spiritual walk as well. He's been around the Word long enough. Number 5, an elder has been around prayer long enough. Shepherds are men who know how to pray. And they spend time doing it. They pray alone. They pray with fellow shepherds. They pray with people. They pray in hospital rooms. They pray in hospital surgical waiting rooms. They pray in funeral homes. They pray in your home. They pray for those who are sick. They pray for those who are spiritually sick. And they pray for sheep who have strayed away. And sometimes they pray with tears in a way that maybe words cannot even speak. James 5 and verse 14 says, if you're sick, call the elders and let them come pray for you. And there's a lot of debate whether that's physical illness, spiritual illness. I really don't care. I think the application goes both ways. Call for the elders and let them pray for you. They've been around prayer long enough. Number 6, they've been around relationships long enough. An elder is not the husband of one wife, as if that is simply a checklist that we just kind of put a check by. It's not about marital status per se, because a lot of men are married. In other words, it's not the marriage that qualifies the man, it's how he treats his wife that qualifies the man. A shepherd has to be a 1 Peter 3:7 kind of husband. Husbands, live with your wife in an understanding way and grant her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life. A shepherd is an Ephesians 5:25 kind of husband. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And why is that important? Because how can a man cherish, listen carefully, how can a man cherish the bride of Christ if he doesn't cherish his own bride? How can that be? And about his children? Don't you think it goes a little below the surface of fertility? And that the issue really isn't about fertility as much as it is about spirituality? In other words, it's not, did he get them baptized before they graduated high school? It is about, did he help his kids grow and find their own faith and follow the example of Jesus because he set the right example in front of them? In other words, the home is the proving ground. But there's no home that is perfect. There's no man who is perfect. And if we look for perfection, then we're not going to find it outside of Jesus Christ. But my point is how shallow we can think sometimes when it comes to understanding the men God seeks. Every qualification, I call them character quality, every character quality that Paul lays forth is absolutely essential. Absolutely. But it is more than just what we sometimes think on the surface. Because sometimes, I've seen congregations, it comes down to this one thing. Does he have a marriage license and has he dunked his kids underwater? Don't you think God requires more from leaders than that? When we talk about raising the bar, that's what I'm talking about. He's been around relationships long enough, and he has a good relationship with his wife and a good relationship with his children per the character qualities that Paul sets forth in Timothy and Titus. And number 7, he's been around love long enough. A shepherd loves people. A shepherd is a people person. He opens his home because he's already opened his heart. He is approachable. He is gentle. He listens. He's sensitive. He's kind. Like Jesus, he's compassionate. You know the number one complaint people make about elders? I don't know how many times I've heard this. Oh, he's hard to talk to. He's just hard to talk to. Well, there's two sides of that coin. Sometimes there can be other issues involved. Sometimes there can be prejudices involved. Sometimes people, here's a person that doesn't get his way. And that becomes an easy excuse. I don't get my way, and so I just go around, you can't talk to him. Well, that happens. But all things being equal and all things being what they ought to be, how can you have a shepherd you can't talk to? It's impossible. Jesus was approachable. Jesus got down out of the pulpit and he walked among the people and he talked to the people and he spent time time with the people. Have you ever been with someone when you conversed with them and they made you feel like you were the most important person in all of the world? And that they were giving you 100% of their attention. Their attention wasn't divided. It was on you, and they were listening to you. That was Jesus. And by the way, the best 4 books on shepherding, on church leadership, the best 4 books are Matthew and Mark and Luke and John. You want to learn how to be a shepherd? You watch and look and read and study how Jesus interacted with people. People with problems, people that didn't have it all together, people that had a lot of questions, sometimes people whose motives weren't always right. But you look at how Jesus dealt with people, and you'll learn how shepherds are to deal with people. So what have we said? A shepherd is someone who raises the bar. He's been around life long enough. He's been around the Lord long enough. He's been around the devil long enough. He's been around the Word long enough. He's been around prayer long enough. He's been around relationships long enough. He's been around love long enough. A shepherd is a caregiver. He cares, he gives, he serves. And in doing so, he raises the bar. God give us men who will step up to step down and who will serve as a shepherd like the good shepherd has served us. Well, that's my lesson for tonight. I hope something has been said there that's been helpful. If there's anything that I need to clarify or whatever, I'd certainly be glad to do that. But I tell you what, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that's very, very important in the life of a congregation. And I encourage those who may be younger to think about that responsibility and to think about that opportunity. And you may be years away. You may not be. You may be closer. But whatever the case may be, prepare yourself and prepare your life to walk humbly with God and to love His people. And when the time comes and the opportunity presents itself and the character qualities are there, I hope you will consider it to be a great honor and work that you will do. It can be very trying, but it can also be very, very rewarding. And we haven't even talked along the lines of what God expects from us as far as holding us as shepherds accountable, because that's heavy too. But God help a church without leadership, because they're not going to go very far. We sing the song of encouragement tonight. If you're not a Christian, why don't you obey the gospel and give your life to Christ? Be buried in baptism or be restored like the prodigal. Whatever the case may be, we invite you to come while we stand and sing.